Welcome to APA's weekly webinar series. My name is Billy Zadek, APA Standards and Codes Administrator. Allow me to review a couple of housekeeping items before we start. All attendees are in listen-only mode. Please type your question in the chat box and they will be answered in the order they are received. If we run out of time and we still have questions, responses will be sent directly to the person asking the question by one of our presenters. Professional continuing education units, ICDs, and AIACLU credits are being offered. For AIA certificates, please send an email to Billy, B-I-L-L-I-E, @apa.org with your membership number. If you did not indicate you wanted your certificate registration, just send me an email. Our webinar recording will be posted to the APA webpage later this afternoon. Additionally, you'll receive a follow-up email within 72 hours providing a designated link to all webinar and town hall recordings. At this time, it's my pleasure to turn this over to Joe Tell and Autumn Gentry. Joe, take it away.
Thank you, Billy, and thank you everyone for joining us today for this APA webinar related to environmental health and safety and information management for universities. I hope everyone is healthy and safe during this difficult time. I know we're all probably getting used to working from home and getting used to more of this webinar type communication and work. So hope everyone on the line is doing well. Thanks for taking the time again to join us today. And I just wanted to say thank you to APA, thank you to Billy for continuing these excellent webinars and this webinar series, especially now during this time. I think it's more important than ever. So thanks to APA for that. We'll be talking about some pretty interesting information technology today that I think is a good example of some of the tools that can be leveraged during this time when we are working remotely and working from home. So I think it's an interesting and appropriate theme and topic for our discussion today. So my name, as you heard, is Joe Tell. I'm a principal and one of the owners at Kestrel Televate. We are an environmental health and safety consulting firm. I've got 20 plus, it's a kind of a bigger plus now, but over 20 years of experience working in environmental health and safety compliance, environmental health and safety management systems, have a lot of clients in university space, facility managers, government agencies, industry clients doing this type of environmental health and safety compliance and information management support, and work for Southeast Missouri State University. And so happy to introduce Autumn Gentry here, who at FEMO. Autumn, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, this is Autumn Gentry. I'm the safety specialist at Southeast Missouri State University. I've been there for 11 years. I am the only full-time EHS professional at the university, and I handle everything from indoor air quality, lab safety, hazardous waste, all of our regulatory programs. So I handle a lot, so.
Yeah, a one-woman show. Great, thanks, Autumn. So I'll kick things off, and we have part of the presentation today. We're going to be talking a little bit about environmental health and safety management systems and a formal approach for how you manage environmental health and safety requirements at your university. Start off here with just a little bit of high-level introduction related to formal management systems. We typically really like and try to recommend an approach that's based on the ISO standards. I mean, some of you on the phone here that work in facilities and may have environmental health and safety responsibilities are used to seeing this ISO framework, this plan, do, check, act approach, and maybe familiar with the ISO standards if you've implemented a system based on those. If you're not familiar, the ISO 14001 is a standard that provides a framework and requirements for implementing formal environmental management. The 45001 standard is the sister standard on the health and safety side. So we typically talk about those together at the same time. But the standards really help you structure your program and provide you with a guide and, as I said, a framework for setting up formal business practices and formal processes and procedures for identifying environmental health and safety risks, planning for controlling those risks, how you implement your programs, how you measure your performance, which may mean audits, inspections, performance monitoring, and then how you make decisions for improving your program so that you can achieve continual improvement benefits. So a big part of that formal environmental health and safety management system is the documentation and the information that's associated with the system. And so we're going to focus on that a little bit today. And as you see on this last bullet, really focus on the what, why, who, where, how, and when it comes to managing the information and the documentation that's required in these formal environmental health and safety management systems. I think this picture probably could be any of our desks. You know, mine probably looks very much like this. I won't give the person's name where I took this picture, but you know, we in the environmental health and safety space and facility managers with all of your roles and responsibilities in your universities, and you have a lot of requirements you're managing, a lot of documentation, lots of procedures and plans and data that you're collecting from people. I mean, we all, I think, are drowning in Excel spreadsheets and huge documents and a lot of paper documents. And so I'm sure that this is a fairly familiar scene for you in facilities management and a university setting. I think that really sums up the challenges that we face in a lot of cases when it comes to these programs. A few key points here related to what and why on information management. Documentation of our requirements and documentation of the work that we do, the records that we maintain demonstrating that we're meeting our requirements is really critical. And the age-old saying from any regulator, any inspector, anyone that works at an enforcement agency is, if it's not documented, it didn't happen. So I mean, that's just really important and important to emphasize. So making sure that you identify those key requirements and that you've documented and maintain records of compliance is one of the key things that we're going to talk about today. Another point that's going to be repeated throughout this presentation and throughout this discussion. A lot of you on this phone call, in this webinar right now, have been working in your position for 20 years, 30 years. You have a lot of institutional knowledge. You know everything, you know everyone, you know where every piece of information is about your university and the facilities that you manage and maintain. I think it's really important to start thinking about capturing that knowledge and transitioning that knowledge into some type of a system, so that after you retire, the folks that come after you and have to take over your programs and take over those operations have access to that information. And that really helps ensure continuity and sustainability of your operation. I think more and more today, it's really important. And we see that as a big challenge with our clients all the time. Somebody takes over a job in facilities and the previous person maybe had been there for a long time and was great, but hadn't documented everything that they did. And it's really difficult for that new person sometimes to transition into that role. I think having good information management practices can also really help you simplify compliance management. We're not only worried about preparing for inspections and preparing for those instances when a regulator visits you, but it sure can help if you have a good formal system and your requirements are identified, the documentation, the records are identified, and you can pull that stuff up easily. That can really help you prepare for those instances. Okay. We see this all the time. There's often a challenge and a breakdown even in defining roles and responsibilities related to managing these environmental health and safety documents and records and this information. I think, a lot of people may be working on environmental health and safety requirements almost as a secondary duty in addition to their regular job. So you may work in facilities and you may be responsible for maintaining certain programs or certain buildings or equipment. And oh, by the way, you also have to manage this environmental health and safety program. But having a good formal definition of the roles and responsibilities is critical so that people understand what their roles and responsibilities are and are held accountable for those. And then making sure that you have backups assigned so that if someone's out, that the information is available. I think, regulators do show up for surprise inspections from time to time. If the EHS manager's out, if, Autumn, as she said at the beginning, when she introduced herself, she basically single-handedly manages environmental health and safety compliance for Southeast Missouri State University, mid-sized university, a lot of fairly complicated regulatory profile. If the state of Missouri shows up and wants to do a waste inspection or an air inspection and Autumn's on vacation, who's going to step in and be able to handle that inspection? So ensuring people understand those roles and responsibilities and are trained is really critical in these management systems. All right. Obviously, people need to know where to go to get the information, where to go to get the documents and records and data. So trying to implement some type of a central document repository, whether it's hard copy or electronic copies of files or both, having a good formal centralized procedure and process and location for your information is really important, making sure that it's accessible, making sure that things are consistently named and consistently managed so that things are easy to find is very important. So those are some themes that we're going to talk about as we get into the more exciting part of our presentation a little later, where we show you the Southeast Missouri State System. But a lot of people have a lot of documents and records and data scattered all over the place in different rooms and different hard copy file storage areas on different computer systems. We have various databases, we have spreadsheets and email files and folders. It's just all over the place, but trying to really focus on getting those things into a central repository is critical. So that's going to be an important theme. So documentation of your environmental health and safety management system. We talk a lot about documents and records, and I think there's an interesting distinction there that is important. A document might be a procedure, a document might be a plan, a form or a checklist before it's completed, but a record really is used to demonstrate that work was completed. A record is your documentation that shows that you followed that procedure, that you completed that form, that you did that work. So we talk about the overall documentation of the management system, but we like to make distinctions between documents and data, documents and records. And data, obviously, it often is a form of a record. But when we talk about documentation, or if we just talk about documents, keep in mind that we're really talking about all of that. Obviously the methods for how you manage those documents and records vary depending on what the requirement is. As much as possible, we really try to encourage folks to keep it simple. Focus on the compliance requirements first, make sure you have those fundamental compliance requirements in place. Try to maintain simple, appropriate documentation to demonstrate compliance. Whether that's a hard copy document or an electronic record, it doesn't really matter. Same concept holds true. And think about the audience, think about who will need that information, who will need the document, who will need the record or the data. Try to design your system with considerations for the audience as well. And then obviously make considerations related to the frequency of provision of that information to people, retention time for records. So what is the real regulatory requirement for how long you need to maintain that record? There can actually be a liability to you for maintaining records longer than you need to in some cases. So trying to really go back and look at those fundamental compliance requirements, identify a good record retention schedule, and then make sure you have a process that allows you to manage and implement that schedule. Some records you do need to keep forever, but others you do not want to keep forever, and that's an important consideration. Right, and then try to think of beyond just maintaining documents, and try to think about your system a little bit more like a knowledge management system. And this is that concept again that I mentioned earlier about capturing that valuable knowledge that those folks in your organization have who've worked there for 30 years. And how do you capture that and transfer that knowledge into a sustainable system? And think about this more in terms of knowledge management. I think you can really streamline how you work, and you can really show a lot of benefit even to management and a lot of value in thinking about your programs more in terms of all of that knowledge. Talk a lot about, and we'll show some examples of, task management and tracking tools. So helping people manage the work that they're doing. So not just generation of the document or generation of the record, but actually how they're doing their work. And then obviously developing these systems so that they're tailored for the audience. It's a similar point to what I made on the previous slide. So key concept here is to start trying to think a little bit beyond just documents. Okay. Some advice on some strategies here, and obviously in a 1-hour webinar, we don't have enough time to go into a lot of detail here, but just some high-level concepts to consider when you're developing and designing and implementing systems like this. Try to get others involved who have input in the system and use the system and need to collaborate with you, your customers, if you will. If you work in facilities, management, your customers are those users in the university who are using your facilities and maintaining your residents in your facilities. Try to figure out how to pull some of those folks in early on in the process to help design the system, to get their feedback, to make sure that you've set up your information management system so that it helps your customer, your end user. And so we talk a lot about cross-functional groups. Maybe you need someone from purchasing, and you need someone from IT, and you need someone from housing, and someone from HR, and you pull from, someone from on the academic side, maybe a professor who's managing a large laboratory operation, pulling those folks in early, getting their input, teaching them how they're involved in the system, and getting their assistance in designing the system. I think that's very important. And then benchmarking within your industry. This webinar is a great example of you doing that. APA is a great organization for helping facilitate this. At the APA and CAPA conferences I've been to, and then some of the other APA events, seeing the cooperation between university peers, facility managers talking and working together, it's great to see. So continue to do that. Leverage your peers. Don't be scared to partner with your state or local regulatory agencies. They want to help. Most state regulatory agencies have a compliance assistance office or a compliance assistance person. They're happy to talk to you and happy to help you. You're not going to get in trouble. You're not going to open the door for some surprise inspection from a regulator. We really recommend that you reach out to them and work with them and partner with them. And that's more and more true these days. We're seeing more and more of that technical support mentality with the regulators as opposed to maybe the way things were 10 or 15 or 20 years ago. So we strongly recommend that. Leverage appropriate information technology. That's a theme that we're going to take into the next part of the presentation. Your system to manage documents and records and data does not have to be overly cumbersome and overly complicated. If it's appropriate and it meets your needs, we'll talk a little bit more about that soon. And then try to come up with some way to monitor your performance and to measure how you're doing. That's a key fundamental element of the management system that we talked about within the ISO framework, is evaluating your performance and identifying opportunities for improvement so that you can improve and you can get the benefits out of the system that you should be. Okay, so that's a little bit of just very high level strategy on environmental health and safety information management, some considerations that you can take back to your organization and think about. At this point in the presentation, we want to transition over to Autumn so we can talk a little bit about a specific example and case study with Southeast Missouri State University. So Autumn, if you would please take it away.
Thanks, Joe. So just to give you a high level on Southeast Missouri State University, we have about 10,000 enrolled students currently. Like most universities, we're down, and we'll probably see a decrease again this year, but we are about 10,000 right now. We have approximately 1,200 employees, 397 acres and 99 buildings, 21 residence halls, and then environmental health and safety at Southeast falls within facilities management. And so with that, facilities has 155 staff. Like I said, we only have one full-time EHS staff, but I do have some help. I typically have a student worker, and then I don't handle all of the air program. One of our supervisors helps tremendously with that, so that is a big help. So we have 4 dual fuel boilers, 21 natural and 21 natural gas boilers, 18 generators, 29 oil storage tanks. We do have a Title V air permit, an SPCC plan, and then I keep it that we are a small hazardous waste generator. I work very hard to make sure that we do not go into the large quantity generator status. So if you want to go to the next one.
Yeah, sorry, it's just a little unresponsive for some reason at the moment. I'm trying. Autumn, sorry.
That's okay.
There we go.
So I had seen a presentation from Joe, and I had been looking for a system that could help us out. I knew we had some problems, and we needed some help to look at this, because there are a number of EHS requirements that we all deal with, and I was worried that maybe I was missing some. We had some non-existent procedures, and then I wanted somebody to just overview the ones that we do have. We do have a lack of human and financial resources. I have not had an increase in my budget in the 11 years I've been there, and we all know that cost has increased. And then at my university, unfortunately, I don't have top management support. So most of where my support comes is from my director in facilities management. She was very involved in this and supportive. And then we had a lack of central information because I held most of the information I had. And then if you were looking at our air program, we had about 5 different people that had different pieces of the air program that when we got inspected, we had to go to each one of those to collect the data.
Sorry, Autumn, just give me a second here.
And so one of my big worries was our safety data sheet management system. We really didn't have one. All the professors are required to have their safety data sheets in the labs, and we're not going to change that. But it is difficult from an emergency response that I don't have access to those outside that lab. So I really wanted those. Part of the reason we did have a branch go through, one of our tree branch break through a window in one of our labs, and we could not tell the emergency responders what was in that lab without going in. So that was a big area that I wanted to address, especially with the chemical inventory. Everybody was keeping their own inventory in their own format. And when I would get them, I'd have to reformat them so that I could use them to fill out my reports. And then one of the big worries that I had was the lack of backup. We have had audits in the past, and 2 of those audits, I was actually on vacation. It just happened to be that I was in town and I could get back to the campus to handle those audits. So we were wanting to address that with this. And then again, I don't have a very large budget. Facilities management is the budget that paid for this. It did not come out of the university's budget. And so I was happy to see that there was something out there that we could actually afford. So what we did is we contracted with Elevate to come in, and we wanted a large overview. We wanted the whole multimedia audit to see where we were, if there were areas we were lacking. And so we had them do that. And then after that, they did a EHS Management System assessment and recommendations. And then we had them create our management system, and we used SharePoint because we already had SharePoint at the university. IT was actually already pushing us to start using SharePoint for a lot of different areas. So they were really excited that this was the area we were going with.
Yeah, thanks, Autumn. So I guess, maybe I'll jump back in. And this by no means is meant to be a sales pitch on us. I think what this is really is a sales pitch on Microsoft SharePoint here next. And what I want to share with everyone it's a system and a platform that we strongly recommend. Many of you probably have it already in place. Many of you may be using it already, which is great. So you might see some things today that you can implement. The beautiful thing about SharePoint is it's Microsoft based. So if you're comfortable using Microsoft tools, Microsoft Office, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, it's going to be quite familiar to you. And it's really something that you can do yourself and you can manage yourself. So it's not expensive off-the-shelf software that you have to go buy. You don't have to be dependent on a contractor or consultant. The system that we're going to show in a few minutes, Autumn manages and maintains and customizes, and she is doing it on her own, which is great. So those are some of the big benefits with SharePoint. The low cost if you already have it, the alignment with Microsoft, and it just makes it easy for you to collaborate with other users in your organization on information on documents, records, and data, and some of that stuff that I was talking about. Hopefully, too, not too foreign to users in the university when you do ask them to collaborate in the system and on the site. Hopefully, it looks fairly familiar because it's Microsoft based. So We're going to do a quick demonstration here of some of the tools, and we're actually going to show the Southeast Missouri State SharePoint site to you live and walk through some of the tools and show some of the information. You'll get to hear Autumn talk a little bit more about some of the things she's building and using and doing. These are just, it's a quick example of a few of the key tools that are set up that Autumn has built or is deploying. Certainly documents and records management. You know, that's a big one with SharePoint. The issue is that most people, when they talk about SharePoint, just think of it as only a document management system, and they think about it as just a place to store files. But SharePoint's much more than that. It gives you web pages that you can easily build to display those documents. It gives you SharePoint lists that you can use to manage data within the site. So it's a more comprehensive information management platform than just a document management system. So we're going to look, there's a compliance calendar in the CMO tool. That's a simple compliance calendar to manage compliance due dates and tasks. We're going to look at a chemical inventory, a refrigerant management program, air compliance program, to see how they have set up their management system procedures. These are just an example of some of the tools that we'll be able to take a look at in the system. So I actually, you know, again, talking about the current COVID pandemic response and this work from home transition for people. I mean, this is a great example of leveraging simple technology and allowing people to still work on their systems and programs remotely. You know, I'm actually connected right now live to the Southeast Missouri State SharePoint site. Autumn is also connected to it and can get to it right now, and as can anyone else who works at the university and contributes to the site. And their site at Southeast Missouri State happens to be set up with SharePoint Online. So they have Office 365 and SharePoint Online. Some, you know, organizations may deploy SharePoint internally on premise, it's called, and that's fine. If so, then they would, you know, obviously need to set up some type of VPN connection or remote connection for their users to access their computer network and get to the system remotely. But most organizations have that, especially for people who are working from home. SharePoint Online is really nice because the ability to just pull this up and log in quickly, it's very easy. When I open this in my Microsoft browser and pick my Southeast Missouri State account, it automatically stored my password. It remembers me and logs in automatically. So it's really easy for me to get to it, and for Autumn and for the other users. So this is what the site looks like. It's a fairly simple SharePoint site. So there isn't a lot of really customized features or tools or complicated elements built into the site. It's fairly straightforward. There's a home page with quick links to some of the key compliance tools, you know, the documents and records library, the calendar, contacts in the university, related supporting information. That's simple and quick and easy to get to. The environmental health and safety management system that we talked about a little bit is described here. So Southeast Missouri State talks about their environmental health and safety policy that they've rolled out throughout their university. They're implementing that ISO Plan, Do, Check, Act approach. So there are the key elements of each of the management system elements set up. So if users are interested in knowing more about how the university is identifying environmental health and safety risks and prioritizing them and how they've done that, they can click on those pages and get information about the management system elements. Where I think where CMO has spent a little bit more time and focus is focusing on their compliance requirements and their environmental health and safety compliance program areas. And so that's what Autumn spends a lot of her time working on and managing. So just a quick example of a couple of these things under environmental areas. I can click on air quality, for example. And Autumn mentioned that they have a Title V air permit. So this is set up as an overview of the Title V program, an overview of the regulation itself and the regulatory requirements, and then, you know, customized to include information for CMO, their emission units, the requirements specific to those emission units, and links to data related to those emission units and inventories associated with those. And then each of these environmental compliance program pages is set up very simply. So there's some type of program overview at the top, as you can see here for air quality. And then the nice thing about SharePoint is it integrates views of the other key components of the site. So documents and records. We know that there's this big overall documents and records library, which I'll show in just a minute. What this does is it just very simply on this page says to take that and filter it down to show only documents and records that are related to air quality, and then it groups them automatically by document type. So if I'm looking for an air quality permit document, I should be able to find that very quickly. If I'm looking for a report or a record or some training information related to that program area, I can use these quick drop downs and I can find that information quickly instead of going to all of the documents and records and searching for something. So that's a nice feature. And then their compliance requirements are populated in a compliance calendar. Same thing, there's one overall compliance calendar, but this page shows only those upcoming events and due dates that are specific to air quality and filters everything down to just show air quality, which is nice. Same thing with contacts, who's responsible. If someone at the university has a question, a lab manager has got a hood in their lab that's not working and they're not sure what to do and they think there may be some issue with air quality. If they went to this page, they could see who to call and who to contact related to that issue. Or if the autumn's on vacation and a state inspector shows up and is looking at the Title V permit, there are the other folks that may be contacted if somebody shows up and needs information. So that's an example of how all the pages are structured. So there's a standard approach for each page, for each program area that's followed. In terms of facilities management and the APA audience, refrigerant management is another good example just to show, but it's set up exactly the same way. So that was a priority for Autumn, as she mentioned, because of some of their challenges in managing the requirements and documentation. So this is an overview of the refrigerant management program with the program broken down by program element, a little bit of an overview of what their requirements are to make people aware, and then links to key data and documents associated with that. So if someone does need to see an inventory of refrigerant or the equipment at the university that contains these refrigerants and what these refrigerants are, they've got their refrigerant unit inventory built out in SharePoint. This is what a simple data management element looks like within SharePoint. It's called a SharePoint list. For those of you that have worked with SharePoint, you know this is quite simple. It's basically like an Excel spreadsheet, but it's a relational database, and this data is connected with other SharePoint lists and other data, like these university locations, and like maybe some of the chemical information that we're going to see, and roles and responsibilities. You can connect all these SharePoint lists and connect all this data so that it's related, but that's what their refrigerant unit inventory looks like. So, other data set up in a similar way. They might have links to, even still an Excel spreadsheet tool that they use with leak rate calculation form. It's in Excel, it works well, people are comfortable with it, so they just link to that. No sense in making it any more complicated if they don't need to. Same thing with this page, where as you get to the bottom of the overview, documents and records, the calendar, related links and contacts associated with refrigerant management. Okay, that's how it's set up. So environmental programs, health and safety programs, split out, set up the same way though. One of the other areas of focus here, which Autumn mentioned, and she can talk a little more about, is the need to get a handle on their chemical inventory and hazardous materials. So a nice tool that Autumn's working on populating right now is this campus-wide chemical inventory. These are all of the chemicals that they maintain at the campus. The lab managers are responsible for inputting chemicals into the inventory and maintaining the inventory for their areas. It pulls from other databases in the site in terms of pulling building information, room numbers, pulling in the safety data sheet from a safety data sheet list. And then we actually have assignments here for the lab managers or principal investigator, but the lab managers who are responsible. So that pulls from their computer network, it assigns responsibility. And then there are views of this database set up. So, Andy Tinney, who I don't know personally, if Andy comes in and looks at the chemical inventory, he only sees those chemicals that he's responsible for and can keep the inventory up to date and maintained so that facilities management knows what they've got out there. Okay. It's another example of the data management elements. And the last piece before I hand this back to Autumn for some comments is typically we recommend some type of organizational breakdown in the development of the system. So making the information usable for the folks that work throughout the university in the various departments or divisions within the university. So, you know, if you work in facilities, there's a page specifically for you that takes all that information and filters it down to just show you what's related to facilities. So documents and records, calendar, contacts for facilities management, facilities employees. You know, so whether you work there, you work in grounds, you work in fleet, you're an admin, whatever you need related to you should be available in the site. In grounds, I know they have SPCC requirements related to them, so those SPCC training and plan review requirements come up. They should be able to see when the training's due, get training presentations, get copies of the SPCC plan. You know, it again filters down the information that they need, and this is part of thinking of your audience, which I mentioned before, and designing information for those people who need it. Okay, that's a lot of me talking and walking through the site. Autumn, within that, you know, would you like to talk a little bit about some of the things you're doing and how you're using it, and what folks are helping you contribute to the site right now?
Yeah, we've mainly been focused on the environmental areas, and then in the health and safety area on the chemical inventory. This site has been tremendously helpful in the fact that we're all teleworking, and it has provided us some opportunities to have other individuals who don't always, that normally wouldn't have work available from home. They can actually get on the site and help us start implementing some of it and putting some data in. One of the things that we've been working on since COVID-19 is in the environmental area, they wanted an area where they could do inspections and reports. So you're going to notice this site isn't as pretty as the other ones because I made this one all on my own in about 10 minutes. But it works for us. So this is where they are from home. They're going in and they're inputting the reports and documents that we need to keep up with our fire alarm inspections and our deficiencies. And so that has been a great help for us. It also, we've had to do our Title V report while we've kind of been teleworking. So this has helped with that because all that information is right here on the site with the air quality. So we've been able to pull everything that we need just about from here. Joe, is there anything else you wanted me to talk about?
Oh, I think those are really good examples of you being able to continue to do the work that you need to do remotely and having access to all the documents and data. You know, that I mentioned there's the big roll-up centralized documents and records database. So if someone did want to go see all of the documents and records related to environmental health and safety, they can do that here. Some are in folders, some are not, but you can see in SharePoint what you're able to do with documents or data is develop these columns of metadata. And so when someone uploads a document, which is very simple, they are prompted to answer some questions about the document. So what is the document type? What compliance program is it associated with? What environmental health or safety management system element, you know, a year that associated with our department or the organization who needs it. If there's a specific permit or rule, what is it? So that's metadata that then allows the document to be pushed out basically throughout the site, so people can access it on those various pages. But if you're comfortable working with SharePoint in the main big document and records library, you can always just come here to find what you need. And it, you know, it works kind of like Excel, where you can go filter things down at the top. So if I want to go find a document specific to air quality, and maybe to, you know, from a specific year, I'm looking for a report, I can go in and I can start using these drop downs and using these filters. So, you know, here, anything that's, you know, posted in the site from 2015 related to air quality will show up, for example. And that's a fine way to find information as well. So that it's good to give people multiple ways to get information. And I think SharePoint is a really simple, really nice way to do that. You know, not to mention, or the calendar I mentioned as well before, the overall calendar. If you wanted to see everything coming up, you can obviously see it in a simple calendar view. And then you saw those filtered down views of the calendar on each individual page. But this is, for those of you who have used SharePoint and know SharePoint, fairly straightforward out of the box SharePoint as it's applied to environmental health and safety. And what Autumn said about that inspections page that she built and those links she created is the beauty of this thing. She built that, she set it up, she did it herself, and didn't need any help. It took 10 minutes, and she created that way for those folks that are working in those areas to just be able to go in, get what they need, upload the documents that are required. It's okay that it doesn't look like super fancy. I think it's really effective, and it's just a great available low-cost technology solution that many of you honestly could probably implement right now on your own at your university. If you aren't already, some of you may be already. So that's the basic overview of the site and some of the key concepts and key points we wanted to make about SharePoint and using SharePoint for environmental health and safety. I think it's applicable to other programs that you may be managing within facilities, not just environmental health and safety. It can be expanded easily to other areas where you have compliance program needs. Anything where you've got a regulatory requirement, where you've got documents and records, have to do training, anywhere where you want to apply more of that formal management system approach, it's really applicable and great technology solution. Okay.
And from the security side, from the security side, we do have some of this locked down, so not everybody can get in. Only the people that need to get in and our air section are allowed in our air section. So not every professor could get on here and look at the air quality. We did the same thing with the inventories because professors really didn't want other professors knowing what they were keeping in their labs. So we can only see the parts of this they need to see.
That's a good point. So permissions management is a great feature in SharePoint. It integrates with your current Microsoft accounts, and Autumn is actually an administrator of the site, and Autumn has full control and can go in and manage the permissions however she wants, and go into the people and groups and and add users and remove users and control this. And that, to me, is a huge step forward and a huge benefit of this. And we've all worked in organizations where the IT group, the CIO, whatever you call them, if you want to get someone access to a folder or get someone access to a database, you have to send an email request to the help desk. You have to wait 4 days, get an email back, answer some questions, wait for them to implement that change. The great thing about this is they've, at CMO, they've given Autumn this at full control so that she can go in and she can manage the permissions in the site and she can set that up. And it's not that difficult to do, and it integrates with the rest of the computer network. So if you did even have something sensitive, something that you can't share out to everyone at the university, you can set that up in the SharePoint side and lock it down. Okay. So there's obviously a lot we can talk about with SharePoint, a lot more in the site, a lot of other features and tools in SharePoint, but we want to make sure to leave about 15 minutes for questions and answers. That was our goal. And I think we're really right on track here with about 16 minutes or so left in the presentation. So I think some comments, it looks like some questions and comments maybe have been coming in through the chat because I see that icon flashing. And at this point, Billy, I think, is going to help us manage that, and we're going to open it up to comments and questions for Autumn or me.
We are going to open it up, and for those who had problems getting in, just send me an email that, and let me know that you had problems. It is a system problem, so we'll go for, from there and all that. But we have lots of questions for you. Joe, can you please click on the tab for PPE?
The tab for PPE?
Yes.
Sure. There probably isn't much here, but Autumn, maybe you can talk about if you've used this yet.
Yeah, no, we haven't gotten to this yet. We've been trying to implement this for about a year, and like I said, I've been focusing on a couple areas. So this one, we haven't worked with this one yet, but it is basically set up the same as all the other pages.
Yeah, and the site for Autumn and for SEMO is a framework and a shell and a work in progress. And as Autumn has time, she's going through and populating the various components of the site. What we focused on showing you are the areas that were her initial priorities. So in the slides, she mentioned that back here, the things that she was most concerned about, where they maybe had compliance issues or problems, or maybe had regulators asking them questions, or she had customers asking her questions. So it was focused on, chemical inventory, safety data sheets within facilities, on refrigerant management, some of those program areas. And so she's been working her way through and focusing on populating those. And, the PPE certainly is a big part of the health and safety program, and would hope that here down the road, in the not too distant future, they'd be able to populate that so people could go there to get guidance on PPE requirements, especially for working in laboratories with various hazardous materials, chemicals, reagents, biological agents, those types of things. Okay.
Thank you. Next comment. I have a problem where I have employees using tablets to complete various documents electronically. However, I have H&S professionals and others who want to complete paper documents and scan to store in an unknown place. The paper copies would go into someone's desk. What is your thoughts?
Well, I certainly recommend getting away from the paper documents as much as possible, and the documents going to someone's desk. I think that is going to cause just problems down the road. If it's appropriate to manage the hard copy, and that for some regulatory reason, or regulators asking for it in hard copy, I think it's fine. But if you can work with those users that are still relying on paper, to try to show them a simple solution for getting that document scanned and uploaded here, or if it's something that's being sent to them electronically and they're choosing to print it instead of choosing to print it, to get it uploaded to a simple site like this, and really work with them to do that. I think that can improve the system a lot. I think SharePoint is, again, a simple step beyond hard copy or emailing attachments. That's not too intimidating for people because it looks familiar. I think they'll see when they look at the documents and records, when they use some of these tools in SharePoint, like this ribbon across the top, is it looks like Microsoft. And I think that goes a long way to convincing them. The other point to that question that's important, I think, is that it also provides for some really nice options for collecting documents from mobile devices, and can even help the group that's collecting documents through tablets. There are some through Office 365 and all of the other Office 365 tools with forms and Power Apps, some really nice ways to create and automate the collection of data from phones, from mobile devices, using simple forms, and upload that data to SharePoint. And so to me, again, Bill Gates or Microsoft should probably be thanking me for this sales pitch, but I think that SharePoint is just such a nice tool, because it can help those folks that are more advanced with some of those more advanced tools, and really help the folks that are still relying on paper or want to save something to their hard drive, which is the bigger issue. And I'll just, one more quick thought on that. What we see so often when we work with clients is people relying on their email to manage documents, and even as the official storage of a document or record, a file. And so that when I sit down with someone at their desk and ask them if they can produce a record, or ask them if they can find a plan or a procedure, 80% of the time, people are going to Outlook and they're going into their email folders and saying, oh yeah, someone sent that to me 2 years ago and I know who sent it. And they start hunting through their email to find the email, and they find the email, and then there the file is, the procedure or the record is a PDF file, is attached to the email, and they open it and they retrieve it that way. And that is the culture. And when you email a file to 10 people or 20 people, then there are 20 copies of that file on the computer network now. So if you can try to get people away from that email folder document management culture and try to get them to embrace uploading the file to something simple like this, where you literally click upload and you see something that looks very familiar and you browse on your computer to pick a file to upload. You know, it's not complicated. It's very easy. If you can get them to embrace that, then they can start emailing each other links to documents, and you teach them how to, you know, go to a file and get the hyperlink to the file, right? Which is really easy in SharePoint, because when you click on these little ellipses right by the document, there's a link right here, and you can copy that link and paste it in your email. If you can at least get them to embrace that, you can improve your system dramatically. So anyway, I'll get back to the other questions, but that just hopefully helps that person who asked that question a little bit with some strategy. Autumn, does that cover it? Do you have anything else that you've seen work at CMO?
No, people have been very supportive of this. Our stockroom supervisor, who manages all the chemicals for chemistry, is in love with this because her current inventory is on Access and on one computer, and she has to do it by hand because that computer is not where all the chemicals are stored. And now she gets to take her inventory with her, and she can actually do it mobile. So a lot of people have accepted this and jumped on board. So you're always going to have those who don't. A lot of the faculty members are not happy with any kind of change. So.
Thank you. Our next question is the SharePoint site the main website that Autumn directs people to when they ask for the EHS website? Or is there a different, more central EHS page on the main CMO website?
There is a main EHS website that we're having a hard time managing because we're over our whole website's doing an overhaul, and we've switched companies. So basically on that website, we're going to set a link that they go to this site when it's done. We haven't sent them to this because it's not done. Because like when you went to PPE, I don't have it all filled out yet, but that is the goal, is that they would go here.
Okay. Thank you. Can you give an example of a situation when there is liability associated with keeping documents too long?
Sure. If you have a environmental, cleanup project and you're emailing or documenting some work that you're doing, that may, be something a regulator may see as a compliance issue, as a non-compliance issue, that could even incriminate you, and you're keeping that document or that correspondence or potential record beyond the regulatorily required date. It's something that I wouldn't necessarily recommend that you keep. A lot of permit requirements have 5-year record retention requirements, and I'm not a lawyer. We have a great lawyer who works for our company and probably has a pretty interesting answer to this, but I just think in some cases, having too much can cause problems because it can open the door for a regulator to maybe dig deeper into the past and deeper into a program or system than they need to, or than is required. And I like to try to keep it simple and only typically maintain records for as long as I have to, unless there's some, of course, business reason or reason for maintaining institutional knowledge or for your own, need. But if it's something that could potentially incriminate you or cause some kind of a compliance issue later, then it's something you should evaluate and you may not want to maintain.
Okay, thank you. How well does SharePoint perform on mobile devices? For example, could an electrician find a work procedure easily from their phone?
Yes, it works quite well. We are working with mobile and some of these other Office 365 apps right now actively with many customers. And the main thing is that the actual page that they pull up on the phone or the form that they go to on their phone, as long as it's not too complicated, then it works very well and it's easy to retrieve or send data to SharePoint. Pulling up a 50 megabyte PDF file anywhere on any device, anytime can be a problem, right? So it it comes down to, is the data or the document a reasonable size, and can it be quickly transmitted over the network or over cell data? We have a lot of customers who use SharePoint to manage audit and inspection programs where they have, daily inspections or monthly inspections where people want to do it on their phone. And that works great for an inspection with 10 questions, 20 questions, 30 questions maybe. But if you have something that's a much more robust audit, that's going to have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of questions, checklist questions, or complicated data entry, that does not work well on a mobile phone on a form with SharePoint. So it really comes down to the specific example. I guess that's my reaction to that question.
Okay, thank you. We have outside contractors conduct our fire protection system test. Can they have access to upload information, or would you suggest they send it to us and we upload it?
Autumn, go ahead and take that one.
Okay. We have them send it to us and we upload it, because if not, for our SharePoint site, we set it up where you have to have a cmo.edu account. So we'd have to issue accounts, and our IT folks probably would not be happy with that. So for us, it's very simple. They email it to us. Our guys take it from the email and put it right into SharePoint.
However, I would add quickly that I'm a contractor and I work for CMO, and I did get a CMO account, so I can access the system. So you can set it up that way if IT and your organization thinks it's worth it. But if that's a contractor who's doing something for you on a very routine basis and needs to send things to you all the time, then I would recommend you explore that option. And if it's SharePoint Online like this, and you had an area where you had the permissions restricted, so that contractor could only go in and see what they were supposed to do, that it is definitely possible. And, as Autumn said, for them, for now, it's easier to just have those people email it, but depends on the program and requirement, I think.
Okay, thank you. We currently use MS Teams. Can you explain how SharePoint and Team works together and how we could use them both?
Was the question about Teams? I'm sorry, Billy, specifically MS Teams?
Yeah,
Is that what you said?
They currently use MS Teams.
Yeah.
And they want to know if MS Teams and SharePoint work together.
Sure. I mean, Teams is a great tool. Like, we've internally embraced Teams for all of our internal meetings, for web, for screen shares, for collaboration. We set up Teams actually within Microsoft Teams, for projects to collaborate with clients, and we share information through Teams. I think it can be a great addition to your toolbox. In terms of integrating with SharePoint, I mean, you can obviously link to launch Teams maybe from within SharePoint. Teams really, to me, though, is more of a replacement for a WebEx or GoToMeeting or Zoom or some of these current web meeting tools. We certainly send links to each other to SharePoint information and data through Teams. And there are some other ways, I think, that you can further integrate Teams with other Office 365 apps, but it's not something I'm necessarily an expert on. I mean, I think it's part of the whole Microsoft Office 365 platform, and SharePoint is a piece of that as well. And when you're comprehensively using all those tools, there you find more and more and more ways for them to be leveraged and work together.
Great, thank you. Next question. Does SharePoint work with other systems such as work order systems?
Yeah, we did a lot of, go ahead, Autumn.
It does not work with TMA if you're using TMA. We still have our TMA system and they don't cooperate, but I don't know about other systems.
Yeah, it's kind of a permissions issue, and if other systems have data available through hyperlinks, where you can create links to the certain views of data or documents that are in other systems, and the user credentials can be passed through in the link, and they can be authenticated in that other system, then you can fairly easily integrate SharePoint with some of these other database systems that are out there. but it's a permissions issue and a linkage issue. There are definitely ways on the back end to integrate SharePoint with other database systems and to share data, especially if those systems are Microsoft-based, such as SQL Server databases. SharePoint has some built-in external data connection tools that you can leverage, and SharePoint developers and IT folks can help make those connections. So we have had some success pulling in data into SharePoint. We're running a script at night, in the middle of the night, that will pull data from another database system into SharePoint to display it. There's an Office 365 tool and app called Power BI, which is a data roll-up and dashboarding tool that allows you to manage and manipulate data. And there are some nice ways to pull data from different database sources and roll up into some reporting tools. And so it takes some evaluation of those individual systems and how they're set up, where they're hosted, how you access the data. But there are ways to do it. Again, it's really a question of funding, probably in dollars, because you could pay programmers to build connections with those systems if you want to spend a lot of money. So it comes down to cost versus benefit.
Okay, well, we are at the top of the hour. We have a few more questions, but I will be sending all of the questions that are in the queue here to our presenters, and they will reach out to you directly. I want to thank everyone for taking time to attend the webinar. Joe and Autumn, fantastic. Thank you so much. I want everybody to be safe and stay healthy, and we will have another webinar next week. It'll be on how to do virtual meetings, so look for that information soon. Thank you so much and have a great day. Bye now.
Bye, thanks everyone.